Hey everybody, it's Booksy. I'm here with an ATER update. So big day today. I'm sure we're all pretty excited. 8% day. Definitely one of the bigger days we've had in the last couple months. I do want to talk a bit about maybe the health of this move, the fact that it happened during normal trading hours. We didn't have any gaps. It gives it a lot more strength than it's more engulfing, right? Then something like this where you gap up and then you end up having this huge gap fill that almost is guaranteed. I want to point out a couple things. So I've been trading this stock for a while now, and I did a lot of videos on the pattern that I saw, which was I called it the gator snap. The gator snap is this pattern where basically you have a tail and then a body. Okay, this kind of W shape. And it comes from a previous wedge. So this is actually the tail end of a previous wedge here. And then it breaks down out of the wedge, and you get a U followed by a second U. And they usually test right here the tip, okay, of wherever this wedge was pointing. Not always, but usually. And so the gator snap in this case, I would have drawn my wedge in a number of ways, and I was just drawing it different ways. But the way that I kind of landed was more or less sort of like this. And a lot of people have criticized that, saying, well, you need to measure to the wicks and all these other things. I think those are good speed lines. And when you look at what is the direction of the stop, maybe you can use those to help point to like here, right? If you had drawn this speed line earlier, maybe it would have helped you point to this range. And those are good things to do. I also think it's good because they do indicate breakouts often. And so like right here, you see we just barely touched the top of these three wicks, I mean. And so I think that it's good to pay attention to those things. But the reason that I didn't do that I'm not mapping it that way is because while in this case it was one very large looking wedge, right? We might see a breakout of it. In almost every other case in this stock, once it breaks down, the wedge is almost irrelevant, right? And so there's no other situation, okay, in which this move right here makes sense. And you might be saying, well, this is just a breakdown and then retracement. Well, yeah, but then look, it came back and it rattled around on these trend lines. So if I hadn't done it like this and I saw this happen, right, then I would just be looking at this as, oh, it's a way it's going to break out maybe or not, and then it didn't, and it goes back down. But because I graphed it this particular way, right, this gives me an opportunity to understand the price action better because I can compare this move and this move to this move and this move. And that's the real fractal cycle. It's not this giant wedge. And I've already talked about it in another video, but we saw the same thing happen right here. It's the exact same pattern. That's this right here. Okay, so it's happened again. And this is the way that this stock moves. So even within, it's like a wedge. There's two wedges within this wedge. And this one actually has two different ways of charting it, which I've drawn. So, I don't think that it's wise to ignore this pattern, because if you do, once the stock starts moving around a lot more and gets out of this very recent time, you don't have a way of understanding that price action, that the fact that it will break down and then come back up, right? So in every other situation on this stock, I mean every other situation, the gator snap has been the pattern. So just because this one time we have this very nice larger wedge, I just don't think it means we should change the fact that this is the way that I think the algorithm works. And it is. And if you look at even here, you see this bottom testing and then this top testing. Okay, and then right here, I did a very thorough breakdown of this, but already I'm not going to do it again. There was a huge amount of touch points in this region. So, the fact of the matter is, I mean, you can kind of see it here, right? The fact of the matter is that you can draw your wedges any way you want, any way that helps you, but I'm not personally going to do it that way because I'm more concerned about the fractal movement, which gives me a better understanding for comparison to previous moves, because there is no wedge breakout that goes up, I mean, almost at all in this stock. There's usually like one, but even those, they break down first, then they go up. So it's just not a good way to try to compare one fractal to the next. So that being said, let me look at this real quick, and I'm just going to give you my quick and dirty. Basically, we have a breakout. We did the gator snap. Okay, we had this wedge pattern. We broke down and up. This down test was right here. Okay, and again, see, if you weren't looking at for that gator snap pattern, this would have looked just like a downtrend. But like I talked about, this is a repeating fractal, and it does repeat. And these sections, like B and C, like they repeat a lot. Okay, so this right here is a zoomed in version of this. And let's just take a look real quick. And I'm gonna hide this triangle just so we can see a little better. Okay. And I think what happened here is basically just a repeat of B and C. You see the shelf? The shelf is really because of this trend line. All right. And then the same thing happens here. If you were to zoom in, you'd see little shelves. And it's basically synonymous with this right here, where you have this previous support line, there's a shelf, and then it drops, shelf, and then it drops. Obviously, you know, when we're looking at this, you see the B breaks down. All right, it's a bottom test. It's meant to sort of be a liquidity test to see how quickly it gets picked up. It does. They're just shaking people out on either end, essentially, bear and bull traps. And then you get down here, you have your big breakout, and the first U, big breakout, first U, and then we wedge. And in this case, when we wedge, and this is inside of the same area, there were two wedges. There was one that was kind of a wedge here, and then there was another that you could have drawn down, down here, okay? And if you were to go back even further, we also had one right here, okay? And this was between the two W's, all right? Or excuse me, between the two U's. One here, then we had a consolidation, a wedge, and then another break. So right now, that's one option that I'm thinking about, is that maybe this is the same as this, where you've got this sort of consolidation that needs to happen to get these indicators back down for a second, and then we can run up further. I think that's highly likely. Now on this was a 500% run, right? And you might be thinking like, well, this doesn't look like a 500% run, it's about to start, but look at the volume uptick, all right? This is massive. And this is not like what we've seen previously, even here. Don't remember that day. I mean, that was big, but I mean, just the sustained volume on this is quite impressive. And there was clearly like a ramp. See that? So I think, if I'm being optimistic, that this is a pretty strong move. There's a lot of volume injected. I do think it's probably going to see some continuation, but you have to look on it on the larger scale and say, okay, until it breaks this, then we could be in this scenario where this wedge right here breaks down further, comes up, maybe it tests right here. I mean, it looks pretty similar, right? In terms of the range, maybe it breaks down, it comes up, tests here. And then if we don't break out, we end up cascading back down. We talked about maximum hurt being like 430, something like that. It's possible, but this uptick in volatility is really good. You know, this is really good. And we do see this here and there, but what we want to see, ideally, would it to be more like this. And if it does this, if it breaks out, it would be also really nice, right? Because then you would see basically it would scoop here, and then as it scoops, it pops out. Maybe Monday pops out, or Tuesday, and then that's it. We're out of this area. We can move on with our lives, and it's all good. So, anywho, I think that's kind of the best way to look at this right now. Is just either we're going to go down again, in which case we're going to probably, come down and test these lower regions one more time, maybe down to here, maybe 450. I could see that, happening. Or we scoop and this is it, and we're out of here. And I'm telling you, when this thing does go, it's going to be massive. I don't care what anybody says. That's my conviction. So, all right, y'all have a good Thanksgiving if you celebrate it, and I will talk to you later.